Hello, fellow Crusaders, and welcome to our latest episode. My name is Sean Wasserkrug, and today we're going to be doing another review roundup. It's the end of the year, so there's a lot of movies that have come out, and only so much time to watch all of them and review them. So we're doing a kind of a review dump. We're going to be reviewing 5 films on one video, because it just takes too long to do a review for each individual one. We had just dropped a previous one where I reviewed 5 films, which was Rebel Moon, Anyone But You, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Poor Things, and The Iron Claw. In this video, we're going to be talking about Illumination's Migration, The Holdovers, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, The Family Plan, and Napoleon. Try to go through these as fast as we can. If there's a particular one you're looking for, there's a link down below to have you jump around. And here we go. First things first, we're going to talk about Illumination's Migration. This came out in the past week. This is a movie that, look, I'm not a fan of Illumination. I don't like Despicable Me, and I can't stand the Minions. God, they're the most annoying characters ever. But Illumination has won me over with certain films, mainly Super Mario Brothers that came out earlier this year. And with Migration, the trailers worked for me. Every trailer that I've seen for this film, it's looked like a fun story, a fun ride, something that I could actually enjoy watching. I like the cast with it. You got Kumail Nanjiani, you got Elizabeth Banks, you got Danny DeVito, all 3 people that I really enjoy. And like I said, it looks like a cute, harmless family comedy cartoon film. The main plot point of this is a family of ducks try to convince their overprotective father to go on a vacation or migration of a lifetime. They basically try to go to Jamaica. I don't think they ever really say where they are in the beginning of the film. I know they're in a wooded area, but I don't think they ever really say where they are. But in the process of them trying to fly to Jamaica, they actually go the wrong way and end up landing in New York. And that's basically kind of where the craziness ensues. Where they also meet a pigeon played by Awkwafina, who's, I think, the name was Chum, or Chub. Animation-wise, if you've seen an Illumination film, you already know what the animation looks like. You either love it or you hate it. I didn't dislike the animation in the film of the ducks and the birds. I do think the humans in this film, which is mainly like one human in the movie, I didn't really care for the look of the human in the film, but I do think the animals all looked solid throughout. Kumail Nanjiani, I always enjoyed him. I think he's a real funny actor. I think he's solid in the film. I think Elizabeth Banks is decent in the movie as well. She plays Pam in the film. Kumail Nanjiani plays Mac. Danny DeVito plays Uncle Dan, which he's basically Danny DeVito. If you know Danny DeVito or you watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he's basically kind of playing that, but a very toned down version of it because this is a PG film. And then Awkwafina as Chump. I mean, if you've seen Awkwafina play a bird, which has happened quite a bit lately, then you know what you're kind of getting with that role. Also, Carol Kane plays Erin, which is like I don't know what kind of bird is it. It's a crane or something. I don't know. It's a weird character. But yeah, I mean, that's it is what it is. It's a harmless family film. I will say that for the harmlessness of the film, it was just kind of meh. Like, it's not bad, but it's only 82 minutes. It's a very, very, very short film, and it's probably a movie that probably could have gone another 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Not that it necessarily needed to. I think the story that they told is established in the film. I don't feel like we were missing something in this, but I feel like it's very quick. It wants you in and out. I do think they could have established maybe the home life or the characters a little bit more in the beginning, because I think they basically hit on their journey within the first 10 minutes of the film. I do think they probably could have used another 10 minutes to just kind of establish the characters a little bit more. Not that they necessarily needed to. I just think the movie should have just been a little bit longer. But I mean, the story itself, it's average. I mean, it's not a memorable film as much as I would have wanted it to be. It's a film where I watched this movie like a few days ago, and I'm having a hard time even remembering certain parts of it because it doesn't leave a lasting effect, which is kind of a bummer. Like I said, it's a watch it once and probably never think about it again kind of film. Like I said, solid voice cast throughout, but I do feel, whereas like Jack Black as Po in Kung Fu Panda, he was born to play Po. When I watch Kung Fu Panda, I am seeing Poe, the character. And with Kumail and Elizabeth Banks and Danny DeVito and Awkwafina, I'm not seeing the ducks or the pigeon in that case for Awkwafina. I'm just seeing their voices and them in real life. I'm not believing them as the ducks in the film. And that might just be a personal thing for me. Like I said, I didn't hate the movie, but I also didn't really like it or love it, which was kind of a bummer because I kind of expected to enjoy this film. Like I said, it's pretty quick. The kids will love it. I don't think the kids are going to be bored by it, but I do think the movie really probably could have, survived another 10, 15 minutes just to make it a little bit more of a stronger story. So for me, I will give Migration a 60%. Moving on to the next film, this is a film that's getting some really big Oscar buzz, and that is Alexander Payne's The Holdovers. The general plot for The Holdovers is a cranky history teacher at a remote prep school is forced to remain on campus over the holidays with a troubled student who has no place to go. The big selling point for this, at least for me, because these kind of movies, I'm kind of like, like they're Oscar baity films. And what people who don't know what Oscar bait films are they are artistic dramas, sometimes comedies or really, really serious films that are really going over the top to try to get that Oscar award buzz. You're not trying to like make a ton of money in the box office. It's really for award recognition. So you're going to hit certain beats in the film, certain story plot points and everything, and certain performances from certain people to try and hook people into thinking this is going to be an award winner. And that's what I thought this movie was going to be with The Holdovers. Now, the biggest way to do that is you cast someone like Paul Giamatti as the lead in this film because he is a fantastic actor. And it works for the most part. This basically takes place, I think it was 1970 is when the film is. And I will say the first 20, 30 minutes-ish of the film, I mean, it's setting the table for what's to come, but it also takes a little while to set said table, and I just didn't really care about the excess characters that were in there. Now, after about, like I said, 20, 30 minutes, they get rid of those excess characters, and it's really focused on these three characters. You got Paul Giamatti, who plays Paul Hunnam, who's the teacher. You got Dominic Sessa, who plays Angus, and then you got Divine Joy Randolph, who plays Mary Lamb. She's the lunch lady on campus, and those three are basically stuck on campus through basically the entire winter break, and they're basically just kind of having to deal with each other. Now, Mary and Paul, they get along well, but Angus, he's a teenager. He doesn't want to hang around with two older people, all through winter break. His family won't come and get him. All of his friends are gone. He's a troubled kid who's like one strike away from going to military school. And he's just someone who really hasn't kind of figured himself out yet. So he lashes out. So he does stupid things. And Paul Hunnam is that one teacher that everyone hates. He thinks everyone's stupid. He holds everyone to a higher standard, so he basically fails everybody in this class. He's got a glass eye, so his eyes always look off-centered, so you don't know how to talk to him. And he just kind of always talks to everyone like they're idiots. Except for Mary. Mary's character, she's dealing with the loss of her son, who died, I think it was at Vietnam. So she's a character who's mourning her first Christmas. This is her first Christmas without her son. And so she's just trying to kind of keep herself together, as well as try to make Paul and Angus kind of just enjoy the situation that they're in, and mainly because I think more for her than it is for them, so that way she doesn't crumble under the weight of the first holidays without her son. Now, in terms of performances, I think everyone does a great job. Giamatti is fantastic in the film. Dominic as Angus, I think, is a solid, because I never heard of this kid. I've never seen this kid before. So as an introduction to this kid as an actor, I thought he did a really good job. And Divine Joy Randolph is great as Mary. I thought she's fantastic. And you kind of just are going through the story of these three characters as we go through this winter break. certain craziness ensues with an injury, and they go off campus and they go on their own little adventures here and there, and you're growing with these characters as you go on. Everyone, and I mean, this isn't anything new. You've seen stories like this before. Is, you know, two characters who can't get along, who can't stand each other, are stuck together and have to learn to, you know, deal with each other and be around each other, and then they start to kind of open up and learn a little bit about each other and realize they're not as bad as you think they are, and you start to develop a friendship and kind of go from there. This movie's following that same plot point. It's not doing anything new or unique, but the performances and the writing are actually really good throughout. I do think it runs a little long. I do think they probably could have cut about a good 10-15 minutes out of it just to make it a little tighter, a little stronger. But at the end of the day, The Holdovers is a very solid holiday film with 3 really great performances. But it's very dry. It's not something that I would say everyone would love, but for people who like these Oscar baity kind of holiday films, then this is right up your alley. And if you're a fan of Paul Giamatti, you have to check this out because he's fantastic. And Divine Joy Randolph is great in the film as well. So for me, I'm going to give The Holdovers an 83%. Going on to the next film, we got The Hungerbirds, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now, I love The Hunger Games. I loved the books. I really enjoyed the movies, or at least the first 2 anyway. Mockingjay is kind of in the same, breath as everyone is. The books, and the movies are, but I enjoy the world that we get of Pan Am and the Hunger Games and all this kind of stuff. So when I heard that they were making a prequel based off of the book that came out after the trilogy, as much as I enjoyed the Hunger Games, I wasn't really ready to kind of jump back into this world. Mainly because I didn't care about the plot of this movie, where it's basically, the general plot is this is taking place during the 10th annual Hunger Games, so it's a story that's following Coriolanus Snow, which was, the main bad guy in the original Hunger Games trilogy, and basically watching him be a mentor to a tribute going into the 10th Hunger Games. That's the general plot of this movie. Now, it's the cast that got me wanting to see this. You got Rachel Zegler, who was great in West Side Story, and who was kind of meh in Shazam earlier this year. She plays Lucy Gray Baird, who's the District 12 tribute. Tom Blythe is playing Coriolanus Snow, which I don't really know him personally on an acting level, so I didn't know what performance we were going to get out of him. You got Viola Davis, who's fantastic in everything. She plays Volumina Gaul. She's basically the game maker of the Hunger Games. You also got Peter Dinklage. Obviously, I love Peter Dinklage. He basically plays, he's like kind of like this teacher but also like kind of runs stuff with the Hunger Games as well. But yeah, so I mean, it's got a really solid cast around it. Obviously being thrusted back into Pan Am and District 12 and all this kind of stuff, it brought me back to what I did enjoy about this franchise. The director, Francis Lawrence, who directed the first 4 films, is back to direct this one. Now, granted, because it's the 10th Hunger Games, it's not as flashy or as interesting or exciting as the original Hunger Games trilogy, because that one was like, I think, the 49th and 50th Hunger Games in the story. But it is still an interesting story throughout. I think performance-wise, I think everyone actually does a really good job. I will say the big negative to it is its third act, because the first 2 acts... Oh, sorry, Stanley Tucci. He's also in this. He plays... not Stanley Tucci. My bad. Jason Schwartzman plays Stanley Tucci's character, which I think is Flickerman from the first films, and he's great. He's a great version of Stanley Tucci in this movie. But the big negative that comes through this is that you have 2 very, very strong first acts of this film, and then the third act is basically an entirely different movie. It's almost like they didn't want to pull a Mockingjay and break this up into part 1 and part 2, so they just put the 2 movies together, which, granted, pissed people off when they did that with Mockingjay. They just wanted Mockingjay to be one whole big movie, and I agree with that. And that's back when they were splitting everything up, like Harry Potter and Twilight and everything, and so they were trying to get the biggest money amount that they could out of it, and it ultimately didn't work for them. Now, with this one, I think that they probably should have broke it up into two films, because you're watching this movie and you're watching the story, point between Snow and Lucy Gray Baird and everybody, and it's very interesting. It's very intriguing with these characters, and then you get to this one point, and the movie kind of stops and almost resets, and then we're just kind of in a totally different kind of film. And now, if it was a sequel and it was a new movie, it'd be like, okay, we know these characters, we know where they're at, and we're kind of going into this new film. But being in the same movie, it is a complete, just kind of reset about about an hour and a half into the movie, and it's not something that a lot of people want to do, and I definitely didn't want to do it, because we still had like about 40 plus minutes left in the film, and it's not a story that, I don't want to say it's not good, but it's not something you want to add on to a story that we've already been watching for an hour and a half. And while the performances, like I said, are strong, I think Tom Blythe does a great job as Snow. I think Ziegler does a solid job as Baird. There's a little too much singing in this, and I will say I'm by the 6th or 7th song of Rachel Ziegler singing, I was kind of over it, and I'm really sick and tired of hearing the Hanging Tree song. So I won't be visiting Pan Am, the Hunger Games series anytime soon. But the last 40 minutes of this film really should have been left off and should have been attached to a different movie. Because I just feel like all the momentum that this movie had kind of just dissipated as the movie went on. It's not bad. I'm not saying that last act ruins the film by any means. It's still an intriguing story. But it really just kind of just reset the whole movie. And you don't want to do that going into the third act, because it really just kind of, you start to go, oh, I really love the third act, but I didn't care for the first two acts, or I love the first two acts, but I really didn't care for the third act, which is exactly what I'm saying right here. No, I don't think there's anyone who really is going to just outright love all three acts, because it's such a tonal shift. But at the end of the day, I do think, long story short, I didn't realize how much I missed the Hunger Games until I saw this version of it. While it's a flawed prequel, it's still a very enjoyable prequel nonetheless. If you're a fan of the Hunger Games franchise, then you should definitely check out the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because I think you will enjoy it for the most part, even though the third act is not as strong as the first two acts. But I think at the end of the day, I'm open to more Hunger Games films. I'm open to more of the world if there's a good story to tell with it. Don't just do it just to do it. Do it with an actual narrative in place for it, because I'm open to seeing more. It's just I want it to make sense and have it be enjoyable all the way throughout. So for me, I'm going to give Hungerbirds, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a 77%. Going to the next film, we got Apple TV's The Family Plan. Now, normally, I wouldn't do a review for this, but Brian and myself, we have been talking about this movie on a couple of our episodes now, and I'm a strong promoter of trying to make this movie a backdoor sequel to the 1998 Mark Wahlberg film, The Big Hit. For anyone who has not seen that film, it is one of Mark Wahlberg's earlier films. He plays an assassin who's, in this team with a bunch of other assassins, and they try to kidnap this girl, and then Mark Wahlberg's character gets feelings for her, and then he has to kind of defend her from the other assassins. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It's young Mark Wahlberg. His acting is not that great in it, but he's charming and fun, and it was an enjoyable film. Lou Diamond Phillips hilarious in the movie. And it's one of those guilty pleasure films that myself and Brian have enjoyed for years and years and years. The Family Plan, fast forward to today, I'm not a big fan of Mark Wahlberg anymore. He's kind of doing the same kind of movies, or the same three kind of movies. And I just don't care for him anymore. Now, I saw the trailer for The Family Plan, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, this looks like a backdoor sequel to The Big Hit. He's an assassin. He kind of talks and acts a little bit like the character that he played in The Big Hit. based off of how this trailer goes, it sounds a lot like what would have happened where his character ended in that film. So I told Brian this, and Brian was like, I'm not watching this movie. It's probably going to be awful. And I said, well, if you watch it thinking that it's a sequel to The Big Hit, this might make it more enjoyable. Plus, you added Michelle Monaghan, who I love as an actress, and I got excited to try to check this movie out. And so Brian told me to, watch it and let me know how it is. And at the end of the day, is this movie gonna, be like, oh my god, it's fantastic? No, but I actually enjoyed this film. And whether you've seen The Big Hit or not, this was a fun action, comedy film. I think Wahlberg, this is the Mark Wahlberg that I enjoy watching. Someone who doesn't take himself too seriously, can have fun, and also be able to do the action stuff. Michelle Monaghan is great in the movie. The action is solid throughout, a kind of Mr. and Mrs. Smith-esque kind of stuff to it. The children actors, for the kids, I think they were solid in the film as well. You got Zoe Colletti, who plays Nina, and Van Crosby, who plays Kyle. I think that they were decent in the film. I mentioned this earlier with Candy Cane Lane on one of our episodes. It's like, the story focuses on the dad, but then they try to force this narrative for the kids, and I just didn't give a shit about it. But in this one, they actually do a really good job of forcing the kids' storylines into the main focal point of the film, and I actually liked their characters. I actually liked their stories throughout. So with The Family Plan, this was a movie that, whether I make this a backdoor pilot to The Big Hit or not, I think actually was a fun, enjoyable ride for what it was. I think Wahlberg is having fun here. It's the Mark Wahlberg that I've missed for basically like the last 8 to 10 years. Monaghan continues to be a bright spot every time I see her in every movie that she's in. I love her in everything that she's in. And it was a fun movie. Like I said, it's not going to be like one of these movies that's going to go, oh, it's one of the best films of the year. But for an Apple TV film, I enjoyed it for what it was. Whether or not you want to use it as a sequel to The Big Hit, that's entirely up to you. I've made it, in my brain, it is a sequel to The Big Hit, and that makes me like it even more. So that might be an exciting factor for me to give the score that it is. But for some people, I do think that you guys are going to enjoy it more than hate it. So I would recommend this if you have Apple TV. So I'm going to give The Family Plan an 83%. Going to our last film, this is another film that's going up for those Oscar baity kind of roles, because like I said, with Oscar bait films, you got the dramas, the dramedies, and then you got the big war epics. And when you think of war epics, there's one real big name that goes out there, and that's Ridley Scott. He won an Oscar, I believe, for Gladiator back in 2001, which was the first movie that I ever saw of Joaquin Phoenix. And we are talking about Napoleon. I think everyone, for the most part, at least at like my age, outside of class, being trained to read history, everyone knows Napoleon as like this one kind of guy. He's a short guy who is really good at war, but he was kind of like poked at and made fun of and all this kind of stuff. And you're adding Joaquin Phoenix into this role, which Joaquin Phoenix is a force when it comes to acting. So I was naturally intrigued by this because you got Ridley Scott, which, great, that he's been really hit or miss, mostly on the miss side lately, but he did give us Gladiator, and you're bringing Joaquin Phoenix, who was fantastic in Gladiator, as this other role. You also add Vanessa Kirby, who I enjoy, and I was willing to check this out because I really kind of wanted to see what Joaquin Phoenix was going to do with this role. This movie's about 2.5 hours. There's a 4-hour cut of this film that is coming, I think, to Apple TV, but it won't be until like January or February of this year. This is weird. I will say this is weird because there are parts of this movie that I really, really enjoy, and there's parts of this movie that I really don't care for. And then there are other parts where I'm like, I want to care, but something's keeping me back from really wanting to care about it, if that makes sense at all. Let's start with Joaquin Phoenix. I think Joaquin Phoenix does a good job as Napoleon. But for me, as I'm watching this role, because he is kind of playing this a weird, unique way, he's playing it serious, but he's also playing it kind of like a whiny little bitch. And the tone of this movie, I feel like just all over the place. Because I can't tell if it's trying to be funny or if it's trying to be satirical or if it wants to be serious. At any given moment, I can't tell if I'm supposed to be laughing or not. I can't decide. And that's what made it weird, because I can't figure out whether I'm supposed to enjoy this movie like a satirical comedy or if maybe it's just bad acting. There's one scene where this one woman is so awful in performance where it's like she has to be satirically overacting or there's no reason that Ridley Scott would have kept her in the film. But I'm watching the performance of Joaquin Phoenix and I'm like, he's basically playing Commodus from The Gladiator, but with a bigger set of balls. Because Commodus is kind of a whiny brat who constantly has to feel validated, and he kind of forces his validation on, in Gladiator, it was his sister. But he kind of has to constantly be validated as the most powerful man in the room, all this kind of stuff, which is what Napoleon does in this movie. And if he doesn't get his way, he stomps and whines like a little toddler. But Commodus in Gladiator is kind of a weaselly little bitch throughout the movie. Whereas Napoleon, he is, but he also will fight. And he's, a brilliant, war tactician. So he's basically playing Commodus, but with bigger set of balls in this movie, if that makes sense. Which I enjoyed, Joaquin Phoenix as Commodus in Gladiator. So I didn't hate this performance by Joaquin Phoenix at all. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit, seeing him almost redo a role he did 23 years ago. So I enjoyed it for the most part. It's more the writing and the pace and the tone of this film, because this is a 4-hour film being cut down to 2.5 hours. I feel like there's stories and there's plot points in this film that are so chopped up that I can't decide whether I need to care about this or not. And I feel like if I watched the 4-hour cut, some of these story aspects would probably hit harder and probably work better than what I'm seeing right now. And one of those is the relationship between him and Vanessa Kirby, who plays Josephine, his wife. I think Vanessa Kirby does a very solid job in the film. I enjoyed her performance, and I think her and Joaquin Phoenix's chemistry is actually really solid in the movie. But halfway through the film, I feel like her performance it's there, but it feels more like an annoyance than it is helping with the plot of the film. And that's one of those when I'm wondering is that a plot point that is stronger or built better in that 4-hour cut than it is in this 2.5-hour cut. There's also this big plot point about him and having an heir, and when it happens, you're like, okay, what's this going to go to? And it's completely dropped from the film after the rest of the way. There are certain characters that are introduced and shown in the film that may or may not be big in the movie, but are just dropped and not thought about through the rest of the movie. And I think that's because they're not necessarily dropped, they're just probably in the longer cut of the film. And it's very frustrating when you're watching a movie and you know there's a longer cut out there, but you can't watch that yet. And you're just like, am I just watching a cookie cutter version of the film, which it's still a decent film, but it could be potentially so much more. And where something like, for instance, like Batman vs. Superman, BVS, we saw a movie, it was garbage. It sucked. But then they came out with a director's cut. It actually turned that movie that was garbage into at least passable. But it wasn't like we knew that version was out there and we were waiting for it to come out. We just heard about it after how shitty the original version was. Whereas with this one, we know that there's a longer cut out there and we're going to get said cut. So it kind of makes you wonder, why even release this version in the first place? You could have just done the 4-hour cut, or you could have made this a mini-series, like a 8-episode series, and stretched it out to allow for the characters to get better developed and for the story arcs to be, more well established. The one good thing outside of the performances I do think that Napoleon does incredibly well is the battle sequences are memorable and really awesome and fun to look at. I will say, on a technical standpoint, this movie is flawless. I think it looks great, it sounds great, it visually, the costumes and The cinematography of everything in this film looks fantastic. But the story, the pace, the tone, some of the performances, that is where the movie kind of falls on its face. And it's frustrating because I see a potential of a really great film in here, but we're only seeing 2/3 of it. And I don't know if the 4-hour cut would make it better or worse. But at the end of the day, I've already seen the 2.5-hour cut, which honestly made it seem like that's the weird thing too. Is it's a 2.5-hour cut of a 4-hour movie, but I felt like the 2.5-hour cut was about 20 minutes too long, and I know that it's about an hour and a half longer than what it's supposed to be. So it's like I said, it's a weird film. Like, it needs to be longer, but I also felt that this one felt a little long, so it's very confusing. But it's one of those things where I know there's a better version out there, but do I care to want to revisit this for a longer version at the end of the day? So it's like, I seen the 2.5-hour cut. I realize that the 4-hour cut's probably better, but do I care enough to want to watch the 4-hour cut? Maybe some of you will feel that way. I still don't know. And that's the weird feeling. Like I said, I know technically this movie is flawless. But the actual stuff that makes people want to love a movie and rewatch the movie and care about the movie is severely lacking. Like I said, performance-wise, I don't hate any big performances in the movie, and the action sequences are great. But at the end of the day, Napoleon is just very weird. And I still am thinking, like, my score right now might be too high, but it also, after a 4-hour cut, might be too low. Like I said, it's a very weird film. I don't know if you guys feel the same way about it or not for people who have seen the film, but that's kind of where I'm at right here. I watched this, and I'm still thinking about it because I still don't quite know how I want to feel about it. And even as I'm talking about it, I'm still just kind of not sure. But at the end of the day, I made a score for it. I have a score for it. I'm giving Napoleon a 79%, but that score could go higher or lower based on whether or not I choose to watch a 4-hour cut when it comes out. I still don't know if I want to. But anyway, that's our episode. I hope you guys enjoyed these reviews. If you guys did, go and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. Of course, we're going to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Like I said earlier, we have another one of these massive review roundups that just got released where we're reviewing Rebel Moon, Anyone But You, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, Poor Things, and The Iron Claw, so feel free to check that out. We will also be coming back here in the next week where Brian Michaels and myself will be doing our end of 2023 episodes where we'll be talking about our most disappointed, our most surprising, and our best and worst films of the year, as well as our most anticipated films of 2024. So we got plenty of videos coming out. Starting here next year, we'll be adding a new show to the channel where myself and another co-host of mine, Jordan Owens, we're going to be talking about pro wrestling. It's going to be a pro wrestling show called the Wrestling Crusaders, so feel free to check that out. We got plenty of reviews coming. Let me know in the comments below, what did you think of these movies? Did you guys feel the same way about Napoleon, or did you guys love it or hate it? What did you guys think about the other films? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and until next time, in case I don't see you, go watch some movies and go have some fun.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.